Hello, all, and welcome to this week's episode of the Mike Muldoon Podcast. Today, I talk with Terry Tucker. Now, I really enjoyed having Terry on my show because Terry's a lot like me. It's all about, you have to understand that you got to be in control of your mind. You really got to focus on it. You just can't drift through life. You got to, be very cognizant of the thoughts, what your beliefs are, and understanding that you can make change. And it was interesting talking to Terry because him and I have a lot of similarities. We're both sort of influenced by injuries in our lives. We both see how sports had a profound effect on our lives. And it was really amazing talking to Terry today. He's actually going through a rare form of cancer, and he's had a couple of amputations. But when you talk to this guy, you can never tell. I mean, he just radiates incredible positivity. So talk about a guy who really has control of his mindset. So here's my conversation with Terry Tucker. Like I just said previously, a few minutes ago when we were talking, I wanted you on my show because you and I, it's a lot about the same thing. It's all about mindset. And if most people don't control their minds or pay attention to it and just kind of let it run rampant, it doesn't really lead to good things. You might just be drifting through life. You might be okay, but you could be doing better. So can you just tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, Mike, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today. A little bit about my background. Born and raised on the south side of Chicago. I'm the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall and actually went to college on a basketball scholarship. I went to the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina.
Right. Okay.
So I graduated from college, the first person in my family to graduate from college. Now I'm really going to date myself. This was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. So I move home to find a job. Right. I find that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as to help my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer.
Oh, okay.
Professionally, as I said, started out at Wendy's. Then I made a shift to hospital administration. I actually went to work for the hospital where my grandmother and my father both died. And I mean, they got such good treatment. I'm like, I want to work for this place. Then I made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of what I did during my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT team hostage negotiator. After law enforcement, I started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball when we lived in Texas. But for the last almost 11 and a half years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer. And then I guess just finally, my wife and I have been married 30 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
My son looks at that. My son's 5, and all of a sudden we've seen that. He's always about talking about space and going to space. Cool. And I'm like, this actually exists now, buddy. This actually exists now.
Yes, there you go.
Oh, okay. So that's actually a really interesting journey, though, from Wendy's to hospital administration to police to negotiation, which, by the way, I mean, psychologically, being a negotiator, I mean, that's got to be fascinating. One of my favorite movies was the movie The Negotiator. And I just love the opening scene where he's the best negotiator in the world, but he can't negotiate with his kids. I feel the same way when I talk. There's so many people come to me all the time for stuff. I work with so many people. And yet when it comes to my kids, I can't help them.
I know when you put the emotional factor into it, all of a sudden, all the logic that we know goes right out the window. And now your kid has pissed you off and you're like, it was the same thing with me. I had all this training, all this background, all this experience, and our daughter would do something and I would totally go off the handle. And it's like, wow, you wouldn't do that in a negotiation, out on the street with the SWAT team. Why are you doing it with your 8-year-old daughter? Because it's an emotional thing.
And that's it. And that's the whole thing. Like when I coach people, there's no emotion behind it. It's very, I'm just a blank slate, but you're right. When it comes to your kids and all those, it's just hard to disconnect from them emotionally. And therefore, it can lead to stuff like that. So let me ask you, so this whole journey that you've taken now, what are some of the key points that you see? Like, cause you just mentioned that you're going through like a rare form of cancer yourself. So obviously a strong mindset must be kind of what's the driving force that keeps you pushing forward, where some people might just, just not go forward,
Yeah, you're right. And I think I was lucky that I learned this when I was in high school. I had 3 knee surgeries when I was in high school.
Right.
The first 2 were pre-arthroscopic, so that I have the long zipper scar on the outside of my knee. And when I went back playing basketball after those surgeries, I remember my brain was putting all kinds of negative thoughts into my mind. Things like, hey, you're probably a step slower since your surgeries, and college coaches aren't going to be interested in recruiting you. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, I am still playing at an elite level, and coaches are still reaching out about the possibility of playing for their college or university. I learned I had to change the narrative. I had to sort of flip the switch in our mind when I was 15 years old. And I've carried that through now to, being in my 60s and having this rare form of cancer that has seen my foot amputated in 2018, my leg amputated in 2020, and I still have tumors in my lungs, which I'm being treated for. But one of the things I learned watching my dad go through cancer, my dad had end-stage breast cancer back in the 1980s. And they didn't know how to treat men with breast cancer back then.
Right.
They pretty much told him to go home and die. And he lived 3.5 years after his diagnosis. And I believe he did because he had a purpose. His purpose was real estate. He was in real estate. He loved it. He actually worked up till 2 weeks before he died. But I sort of tucked that in the back of my mind and said, when it's my turn in the barrel, I need to have that purpose. I need to have something to do. Otherwise, you just sit around and think how horrible, your plight is. And that's what I've been doing.
It's funny. My dad, we just talked about, my dad just passed away a few weeks ago. And I think that was him. And I think his purpose really for keep going on, all the stuff we've been going through, it was for my mom. He was always so concerned about my mother. And I think, his purpose was always being there for her. Always, even when he was in the hospital going through all this stuff, he was always like, how is your mother? Is your mother home? Is your mom safe? Is everything good? And I think it wasn't until we, my brother, because I'm the middle of 3 boys. So I don't think it was until he kind of, we would just tell him, Dad, we've got mom. Mom's fine. All 3 of us are here. We've got mom. Mom is fine. Mom's going to be fine. I think that kind of gave him the strength to kind of just let go at that point. And you're right. Purpose, if you're sitting around and you're just not doing anything, and you're, I always say it's like, idle hands, an idle mind, that's going to create a lot of challenges. I know so many people, I'm going to get off on a tangent here a little bit, but I know so many people whose daily basic needs are covered by more than they'll ever need, right? They got money, they got this, and their lives are miserable. They are always upset. They're always a drama. There's always something going on. And it's because they need to exist in something, but they haven't found a purpose or something to get behind to occupy their time to keep them, moving forward. So they just sit there and it's like, well, I've got nothing to do. So I just have to, my brain, right, has to work and create something. So I feel like I'm alive. And then it just turns into, a social media post of complaining and whining and whatever it might be about. And one other thing I want to touch on too, because you and I have a similar background. When I was young, I had a motorcycle accident. I was playing college football, and that kind of is always a driving force for me because I lost mobility in my hand. So I can only bend my hand forward. I can't extend. I can only, I can't. And I was a wide receiver in college. And I remember I had to fight through that. And it was very easy to be like making excuses like, well, how am I going to catch the ball? How am I going to do that? I went on and I continued. And that's been one of the foundations of my life to say, look, you can overcome obstacles. I mean, I went on to be one of my top all-time leading receivers at the university. But I played with basically a hand and a half, but I never let it limit me. I never let it limit me. It was all about, nope, I will figure out a way to do this. So
when I was at the Citadel one year, we had a president by the name of James Stockdale. That name may or may not ring a bell to you. Stockdale was a naval aviator. He retired from the Navy as an admiral, but he was shot down during the Vietnam War in his A4 and spent 8 years as a prisoner of war in the infamous Hanoi Hilton. That was just a horrible experience for so many of our men and women. Mostly, I think they were all men at that time. And I remember being at an event with him. I didn't spend a lot of time with him. He was the president of the college. I was just a cadet. But somebody asked him, who were the people that survived that ugliness, that brutality, that torture? And he said, well, let me tell you who didn't survive. He said it wasn't the big, strong, tall, tough guys that thought they could handle any kind of abuse or torture. And then this was interesting too. He said the other group that didn't survive were the optimists. He said those were the people that thought they would be let go or rescued by Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter. And Thanksgiving and Christmas and Easter would come and go, and they wouldn't be rescued or let go. And he said those people died of a broken heart. He said the people that survived were the people that understood what they could control, which according to him was basically our breathing and the thoughts in our mind. Everything else was at the discretion of the enemy and controlled it. And Mike, I think that's where people get sort of, off the rails. We try to control things that are totally outside of our control, that we have no business even thinking about. If you just control the things that you can control, let the other things take care of themselves, I think we'll all be a whole lot, won't be as much mental illness, won't be as much suicide, won't be as much alcohol and drug abuse, because we'll understand what we can control and we'll control that.
There's a lot of power in letting go. I've noticed that in certain things in my life where I get to a point where I'm like, I don't care. I'm just doing what I'm doing, and I'm going to do the best that I'm doing. And I cannot control what these other people are going to make or what these decisions are going to be. There's a lot. It's very liberating, but it's funny, when it comes to relationships too, how many people let other people live in their heads or justify how they should be living their lives, and they worry and they're concerned. What are they thinking about me? What are this? What are that? And it's like, and it really gets around. You have no control. Like one of the things that I would say to people is I don't care what people think about me. I don't, but it's not in a very aggressive sort of, I don't care what Terry thinks about me, because then I would. It's more like I can't control. It would be extremely selfish of me to be concerned about manipulating a certain way that you like me. Do you know what I mean? I'm just going to be me. If some people are going to like me, no matter what I do, some people aren't going to like me, but I'm just comfortable with being me. And therefore it's just a liberating experience, understanding that I can't control you. And so many people don't. They try to control other people, how they're perceived by others. So they wear the mask. And one way they're like this with Terry, the other way they're like this with somebody else in here. And eventually I think that just drives people crazy. But I agree with you.
Yeah, it does. And I think, I go back to my dad who, you look at my resume and it's kind of like, well, okay, you were in business and then you became a cop. So the backstory to that was my grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. And was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle. My dad, I think, was 1 at the time. But he remembered the stories my grandmother told of that knock on the door of, Mrs. Tucker, come with us. Your husband's been shot. And so when I expressed an interest in following in my father's footsteps, my dad was absolutely not. Or my grandfather's footsteps, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to college. You're going to major in business. You're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that's what my dad wanted me to do. And I think that kind of goes along with what you're saying. I mean, people, I got to live my own life. And I had a choice. That was probably the first big adult choice that I had in my life, other than where I was going to go to college. When I graduated, I could have said, sorry, Dad, I'm going to go blaze my own trail. I know you're dying, but I'm going to do my own thing. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. So understanding the backstory, I went into business because that's what my dad wanted me to do. And he did those things. A lot of times people make judgments about us because they don't like us. My dad made judgments about me because he loved me. Like, I don't want you to do that line of work. I want you to do something where, you're more safe, you're more secure. It's more about 8 to 5, you wear a suit to work and that kind of thing. And I was a 37-year-old rookie police officer, which by most accounts is pretty old. You must have just got in there under a deadline. Isn't there usually a cutoff where they're like, they won't take you? There wasn't. There was a guy in my academy class that was 50 years old. He'd been an insurance salesman his entire life, said, I want to be a cop. And okay, I've done my 20 years. Now I'm going to go to work for the Cincinnati Police Department. So I mean, it was pretty old, but that's one of the things I am most proud about that I've done in my life, that I never let my dream die.
Right.
I never said, okay, I'm comfortable here. I'm just going to stay here. It was, no, I'm not comfortable here. I know I'm supposed to do this. I got there, but I got there quite late in life.
Right. Do you know what's funny, Terry, is there are 5 things that I talk to people all the time about. And one of them is right there. We talk about your life and you need to live it.
Okay.
And so many people won't. They're so influenced by their family. They're so influenced by their friends. They're so influenced by other people that they kind of, I talk about, like, you have to be willing to be a lion, and a lion roams alone. It has nothing to do with masculinity.
Right.
Lambs and sheep, they're all herded animals. And that's what
Right.
most people are. They will stay in a pack. They might think that they're roaming, but they're not. They'll stay in a pack. But it is your life and you have to live it. Because at the end of the day, you're going to get to a certain age and you're going to look back. Now, you might rub your family wrong. Obviously, hopefully you're living something that's not hurting other people.
Right.
But, you wanted to be a cop. It's your life. You got to live it. There's so many people who dream of, being a dancer or wanting to do something like that. But their family says, no, you got to play it safe. Go into marketing. So they go into marketing, but they're miserable. So great. On one hand, they got a solid paycheck coming on there, but now they're miserable. And I think that's what we're finding with a lot of people in the world. Due to social media comparisons, right? Why do they have and I don't have? But a lot of people aren't willing to take the steps. So they just sort of fall into formation, and then they find themselves miserable and sometimes regretful or resentful to other people because, well, this is what I really wanted to do, and I didn't get a chance to do it. My parents are really cool about things. My dad always said, do whatever you want to do as long as it doesn't hurt people. And I was really fortunate. I was in entertainment for 20 years, most of it broke and unemployed. But my parents never once picked up the phone and said, Michael, you need to stop this. You need to smarten up. You need to go get a job. They never said it. They just let me figure it out.
Yeah. And that's great. Yeah. Because so many people, and parents do it for the right reason.
Right, exactly.
They love you. They want what's best for you. They're not trying to hurt you. But if you think about it, they are,
Right.
and we always said that to our daughter. Play to your strengths. What are you good at? And go find things that you enjoy doing where you play to your strengths. And, I mean, my daughter, fortunately or unfortunately, got my height and is 6'2" and actually went to the Air Force Academy to play basketball.
Right.
But it was like, it's your decision. Where do you want to go to school? And what do you want to do?
Right.
I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's your life. You figure it out. But there were so many times I found myself kind of getting in my father's mode where, okay, no, you shouldn't do that. I'm like, shut up. It's her life. Let her live it. And you've raised her right. Let her figure it out.
And the thing is, most people, apparently, like you said, they think they're doing right, but most people are making those judgments for other people upon the situations of which they're living and they're existing and the limitations they bring. So they look at it and go, well, that's something I would never do. Right. So why would you do it? That's why a lot of times people hold other people back. You've got a young person in a town that wants to leave. They want to go experience the world. But their friends or their family, like, why would you do that? And they'll get mad or angry at them or something. But it's because they wouldn't do it. They're not strong enough to do it. So because they're not strong enough to do it, they don't want to see you do it, because then you prove that they aren't strong enough, because, if you're willing to do it and they're not willing to do it, well, that must say something about me. Right. So 100%, I my wife and I, we have young kids. My kids are only 9 and one will be 6. Okay. And, we are very, very conscious of the way we talk to our kids. Like, my daughter is tall. She's almost 5 foot for 9. And she's in gymnastics. And she towers over everybody in gymnastics. She's probably the height of what most gymnasts are at the Olympic level. Right. And but she loves doing it. And there's been times I've had to catch myself. And she's not here, so she can't hear me. Where, she's trying to do all these things. And I want to say, honey, most gymnasts are, they're. And I don't. Because I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I don't know if this gymnastics thing can really work out, because she's probably going to be 6 foot tall. I don't know how many 6 foot tall gymnasts are, but I'd say, you know what? She loves it. She's excited about it. And the one thing I've realized about her is she's putting in the work. There were some things that she was trying to do one day, and I was like, oh, that looks really awkward. And then one day she walked out, she goes, Dad, watch. And she did. I said, hey, you know what? It's your life. I'm not saying she wants to be a gymnast, but I'm just saying I'm not going to limit her. That's what you want to do. That's what you want to do. But you're right. Most of it comes, parents think they know what's right for you, but they don't. Not all the time.
They don't know your life. They don't know. And I always, especially when I speak to young people in person, I always tell them, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it.
Do it.
Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be those things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do, but then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
Yep, that 100% right. You know, it's you never think about, oh my God, all the things you think about, all the things you didn't do. You know, that's the thing about time, right? Like, you know, I try to tell young people too, who you know, I could see they're being really stuck in their life and they're scared to make a thing. I'm like, I'm your time machine. You're 20 right now, okay, and you think the whole world's ahead of you, and you're going to just play it safe, but you're going to be 40 someday. And you're going to look back at 20 and go, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I take a chance? Why didn't I go out in the world and fail? It's the other thing you probably see with a lot of young people. They're so scared to fail nowadays, right? Again, social media, comparing yourself to your friends and what they've got and what everybody else is doing. And I have to have this and I have to have that. And I mean, I failed probably into my mid 30s. You know, it just.
Well, I put it in an entire chapter in my book about the importance of failing and failing or failing often, especially when you're young, because you don't have the responsibilities and things like that. Make mistakes.
Right.
You know, I love the quote from Nelson Mandela, the former president of South Africa, who said, "I never lose. I either learn or I win."
Right.
And if you keep that in mind, okay, you make a mistake, so what? And for some reason, young people today seem that, you know, Taylor Swift and, you know, all these people that they admire, those people never fail. Oh, I guarantee you they fail. You don't get, I mean, the road to success is paved with failure. If you're not failing, you're not going to be successful.
Well, it's like I have friends who are really, who are comics, you know, pretty successful comics. And when they're on stage, they kill. And it looks effortless. It looks like just that guy is, he must just roll out of bed and he is brilliant, but they don't see the work that these comics do on the road or in dark places or at home or whatever to get to that point. Like great athletes, right? You know, you look at some athletes, like you look at Michael Jordan, amazing. But you could see, you don't see the work that Michael had to put in to get there and some of the failures that Michael had along the way, you know, some well documented. So I agree with you 100%. It's so important, but a lot of, again, just comes down to, you know, being not operating on an autopilot, right? So again, understanding your mind. Most people just operate on autopilot. They get up every day, they go through the motions, they come home, they eat dinner, they sit on a couch, they rinse and repeat. And then sometimes question their lives about why is nothing happening for me? It's because you haven't paid attention. Have you ever listened to Earl Nightingale?
Yes.
Okay. I love Earl Nightingale. I quote him all the time. Anybody listen to my podcast? I just love, but the best analogy I ever heard from him is like, you know, you have to be the pilot of a ship. Like if a ship has a captain, there's a pretty good chance it's going to leave port and get to where it needs to be. Mm-hmm. But if you're not piloting that ship, it's never going to get out of the harbor. It's never going to get out of the harbor. So what's the name of your book, Terry?
Sustainable Excellence, the 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life.
Wow. Where can we get it?
Anywhere you can get a book online, Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, Apple iBooks.
Perfect. So do you still do a lot of work with young people?
I try. I'm still being treated for cancer. I have tumors in my lungs. So every third week I'm at the hospital for an entire week. And then I get 2 weeks off to be on podcasts like yours and appreciate that opportunity. That gives me a purpose. That gives me something to do to, you know, I don't have all the answers, but I've been through some things, and those things I like to share in the hope that maybe they can help other people. Right.
So, I mean, now I know you have a daughter. Are you still married?
30 years.
30 years. Okay. I thought you said that. It's always an awkward one to ask people because you're like, no, I'm not. And it's like, oh, sorry about that. No, I was going to say, because for your wife, I mean, you know, she must just be, you know, because, you know, she's going through it with you, you know, for her to just have to, you know, have that strength and go through it with you must be just incredible.
It is. I'll tell you a funny story. So when I had my leg amputated, I was 8 years into this cancer fight, and my doctor wanted to start me on chemotherapy. And I looked at him and I said, is it going to save my life? He said, nah, probably not, but it might buy you some more time. I said, well, if the outcome's going to be the same, I'm not sure I want to do that. I said, but I'll go home and talk to my family. So it's just my wife and daughter and I here in Colorado. And so, you know, I go home, start telling them what's going on. My daughter's immediately like, all right, we need a family meeting. I'm like, family meeting? There's 3 of us. It's not like we got a board here or something like that, you know? So we end up sitting around the kitchen table and individually talking about how we feel about me having chemo. And when we're done with that, my daughter's like, all right, let's take a vote. How many people want dad to have chemotherapy? And my wife and daughter raised their hand like, wait a minute. Am I getting outvoted for something that I don't want to do? But I remember when I was back in the police academy, our defensive tactics instructor used to have us bring a photograph of the people we love the most to class. And as we were learning different techniques to defend ourselves, we were to look at that photograph because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself. So I ended up taking chemotherapy, not because I wanted to, but because I love my family more than I love myself. And that ended up being the right thing to do. It was a bridge that got me to the clinical trial drug that I'm on now. And if it hadn't been for them, I wouldn't be here talking to you right now.
Wow. It's funny. One of the things you sent to me that I thought was really interesting is that if you never quit, you're never defeated. And I try not to mislead people when I'm talking to them in terms of people chasing dreams. I get honest sometimes. There's a chance you're going to chase your dreams and you're not going to get there.
Right.
There's a chance that, there was a chance right now that if I love football, I love playing football. I love, but there's a chance right now if I decided I want to be a quarterback for my New York Jets, which technically they need one right now, but
yes, they do.
But if I want, it's not happening. No matter how much work I put in, it's probably not going to happen. But I always tell people, you will always be better for it, for having gone after it, because you'll never have the regret that you didn't do it. But you'll also probably find something else along the way. And you'll develop some skills and stuff along the way. And you might realize that you're actually find something better than you were actually chasing after. Yeah. Because most people, all they're ever trying to do is fulfill a need. And they think if I get this, it'll provide this, when realistically you might just find yourself doing this and it fulfills this need a different way. You know what I mean? So, but I always just tell people, chase it, because you never know. You'll always be better for going for it, even if you don't get there, and you'll probably find something along the way. And not to mention also the skills and the strengths and the mental fortitude you put in place. I always attribute, and you could probably relate to this, a lot of who I am goes back to being an athlete.
Oh, yeah, totally. 100%. I always say that one of the biggest things that team sports taught me, and I think it can be whatever team you're on. For me, it was sports, but whatever, we're all part of a team.
Right.
It's the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. You realize on a team that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, et cetera. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. So being part of a team, I mean, you learn so much. You learn how to win. You learn how to lose. You learn how to be coachable. You learn how to be part of something that's bigger. You learn so much from athletics, which I did. But at the same time, I think back, I played against Michael Jordan his freshman year at North Carolina, my senior year. Funny story, kind of fast forward 20 years. My brother, who was a pitcher for the University of Notre Dame's baseball team, is a basketball coach in Chicago at Loyola Academy. He's coaching Michael Jordan's two sons.
Oh, interesting.
He said, one day I'm at practice. I'm teaching the kids a drill. It's toward the end of practice. And he said, I look up, nobody's paying attention to me. So I look where the kids are looking, which was over by the door. Jordan had come into the gym as a dad to pick his kids up after practice and take them home. Right. And my brother looks at him and says, hey, Michael, you're a little bit of a distraction. Would you mind waiting out in the hall? And Jordan and his wife were incredibly gracious.
Right. He gets it.
He was like, I'm sorry, coach. I didn't mean to interrupt. I'll wait out until practice is over. My brother thought later, gee, I'm probably the only coach in the history of basketball that ever kicked Michael Jordan out of practice. You're
the guy that's ever asked Michael Jordan to leave a gym.
It's like get lost, right?
That's funny. Actually, apparently he's got something over here where I live in the Carolinas. I live up on the lake, and apparently they said he's got something over here in Charlotte. So, and I've heard nothing but good things about him. First time I ever kicked Michael Jordan out of a gym. Oh man. But so for me, sports, the other thing it taught me is accountability, which is one of the, so again, there's 5 things I always talk to people about. Number 1, it's your life, live it. Number 2, choose your relationships wisely, personal or professional. You are the sum of the 5 people you're around. Everybody says it. Everybody's been saying it, but if you're not getting where you need to be, it's probably the people that you're surrounded by. And that's where all your bad habits or all your good habits are coming from. Another one I just talk about, understanding that your thoughts create your emotions are your actions, your results. So if you have great thoughts, you'll have great results. You have bad thoughts, you'll have bad results. But the 4th one I was talking about is accountability. We seem to live in a society right now where accountability just goes out the window. Even when we have more proof than anything that you didn't do it, the tape doesn't lie. It's like when you used to sit in meetings with your coach and he'd be like, you missed the block. And you're like, no, I did it. Yes, you did. It's right there on the tape. You missed the cut block.
Yeah.
But nowadays we live in a society where even a coach's point, not saying you missed the cut block. It's right. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. And I think accountability is a big one I learned from coaching, because I'll always just take responsibility. It was my fault. You're right. I hurt the team there. And then the last one I always just talk about, and I think you probably agree with this one, is give time to the people you love. We spend so much time giving so much time to other people that we sometimes forget to give time to the people that we love,
We do. And I always say my family, I talk about my 3Fs: faith, family, and friends. I have a very strong faith life. I gave you the story about my family. I mean, that's kind of how we are. And then my friends. And those are the things that are important in life. Those, how much money you make, how important you are, how much prestige you get. None of that stuff goes with you, beyond the grave. And I always talk about, people seem to think they're born empty. And that, when they get out of school and they sort of get into life, whatever that looks like for them, that their job is somehow to fill themselves up. I need to get a great education and have, a great job, make a lot of money, drive the latest car, live in the best house, have the greatest iPhone. And what I've come to find, Mike, is that's not the case. It's just the opposite. We're not born empty. We're born full. We're born with everything we need in our lives to be successful. We just need to find it, pull it out, and use it to our benefit. So I find that the people that are happiest in life are not the people who, I got to get stuff. They're the people who empty themselves out, certainly for the betterment of themselves, but also for the betterment, as you've said, for your family, for your friends, for your community. Those people seem to be happy. The people that are always chasing the latest and greatest gift, those people never become happy, never become fulfilled. It's what you give. I remember the you remember Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers.
Yeah.
So there's a great story. 2003, Fred Rogers dies, and his family is going through his effects, and they find his wallet. And inside his wallet is a scrap piece of paper that Mr. Rogers had written 4 simple words: life is for service. Make your life about service to other people, and I promise you, it will be fulfilled beyond your wildest dreams.
See, most people try to do it the other way. They say, well, when I get, I will give.
Yeah.
But yet the easiest way to get out of a lot of your challenges is to actually provide to other people, and it'll come back around. Yeah. And I always just say life's about living. And and just to back to what you're just talking about there, so many people think by collecting items and having this and that, they're using those to make them happy. And some of the happiest in the people have the littlest amount of materialistic things. Now, I'm not saying I have nothing against materialistic things. No. If you like your cars and you like your house like that, but ultimately what's going to make you happy as a person is just being completely aligned with your true self.
Exactly. And that's not a hard thing to do.
No.
But, I don't know if you're familiar with Ed Milet.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
So, he talks about the 4 types of people in the world. He said the first group are the unmotivated, which is the vast majority of people. It kind of goes to what we were just talking about. The vast majority of people in the world. He said the second group are the motivated, kind of a carrot and stick approach to life. If I do this, I will get that. It's a life strictly based on motivation, but it's kind of low level, but it works for a lot of people. And then the third group he talks about are the inspirational people. The word inspiration coming from 2 words, in spirit. If you're inspirational, you move people with your energy. And then the last group he talks about are the aspirational people, where people aspire to be like you. And sometimes when I speak, I'll do this as kind of a joke. All right, knowing that, how many people are unmotivated? And nobody raises their hands. Nobody. But if you agree with his philosophy, that's the vast majority of people that are out there. But nobody ever thinks they're unmotivated.
Well, again, it goes back to the Earl Nightingale thing where he says, you ask anybody in their 20s, will they be financially well off or whatever, or be able to take care of themselves by the 60s? And almost everybody will say yes. But yet, by the time they get to that age, only 2% actually get there, 6%. There's, he just breaks the stats down. But it's true. But again, it's just getting back to what we originally started talking about. It's really just about mindset. And I don't think that means you have to be locked in every moment of the day, just locked in. But if you don't pay attention that you have more control of your life than you do, and you can make better choices, then, you're going to feel stuck and you're going to blame everything else when realistically it all just starts with you.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I played basketball. We were in the same conference with Isaiah Thomas. I don't know if
Yeah, I know who Isaiah is.
Okay. Went to the University of Indiana, won a national championship with Bobby Knight, and then went on to the Pistons and won a couple NBA championships. And I used to see him in the summer when we would both come back to Chicago. And what was Bobby Knight like? And he said, great guy, loves his players, etc. But he used to tell me this quote that Knight had, and he said it was very simple. He said it was mental is to physical as 4 is to 1. So here's this great coach teaching elite athletes to use their bodies to be great basketball players on the court. But what he was really saying with that quote is that your mind or your mindset is 4 times more important to your overall success than anything that your physical body is going to do.
Right. Amazing. Bobby Knight. All right, Terry. This was great, man. I totally appreciate you. You got anything else to share with me? You good?
I am good. Let me leave you with one more story.
Yeah, please do. Of course.
So I mentioned I had my foot amputated and my leg amputated. I had a nurse recently ask me what it was like to go through that. And I told her, I said, I'm 6'8", so learning to walk again, falling from this height, not good. You get hurt. So
I'm 6'3". So, I mean, there's a big jump from 3 to 8. So
yeah. But what I told her was cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind. It can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Mike. That's who everybody who's listening to us is. And we spend a tremendous amount of time, working on this vessel, this body. So, we go to the gym, we eat right, we get enough rest, we reduce stress. And I'm not telling you shouldn't do that. You absolutely should.
Of course, 100%.
But what I am suggesting is maybe every day, spend a little more time working on who you really are, your heart, your mind, and your soul. We know this body's going to die. It's going to go away. It's going to decay. But your heart, your mind, and your soul, I believe those things are eternal. I believe they live on. And I don't think we spend nearly as much time working on them as we should.
And it's amazing because they talk about the things that we get for free are the things that we seem to devalue the most. And your mind, your thinking, your imagination, all of that is free. It comes, like you said, you come full into this world. And so many people just devalue it because they don't see a cost behind it because it's free. So that was great. Terry, thank you so much. Thanks for being part of the show. I'm glad we finally got to connect. I wish you the best with your health.
Thank you.
I wish you well. Yeah. And let's keep in touch, all right?
I would like that. I appreciate being on, Mike. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.